Imagine this. You're sitting alone in a small, dimly lit room. The walls are bare, the air is still. There is no pain here, no noise, no deadlines, no fear. Everything is fine. You have enough to eat. The temperature is just right. The chair beneath you is soft. Life isn't thrilling, but it isn't painful either. It's comfortable. Now imagine years pass. The world outside that room continues to change, evolve, burn, rebuild. But inside, you remain untouched, safe, undisturbed, comfortable. But something starts to gnaw at you. A restlessness you can't name. You begin to wonder if maybe you've missed something important. A dull ache emerges, quiet but persistent, like a muscle that's slowly atrophied from lack of use. You try to shake it off. After all, you're okay. Everything's okay, aren't you? Now zoom out. Imagine that room is not just a room, but your life. And the comfort that once felt like safety now begins to resemble a cage. You never took the risk. You never asked the hard questions. You never chased the impossible. Because comfort whispered to you that this was enough. So here's the paradox no one wants to face. The more we seek comfort, the more imprisoned we become. The safer we play it, the more of ourselves we lose. And in the pursuit of feeling good, we often abandon the pursuit of becoming someone good, or great, or even real. You say you want to grow, but do you? Because growth requires sacrifice. Growth hurts. Growth is standing barefoot in a snowstorm while everything you once believed melts around you. It's the terrifying act of letting go, of comfort, of certainty, of self-image. But society tells you otherwise. Take it easy. Don't work too hard. You deserve to relax. You shouldn't have to struggle. And those words, so kind, so gentle, are the very lullabies that put your potential to sleep. So ask yourself, how many of your dreams did you trade for a bit of ease? How many days have passed where you did nothing, because nothing was required of you? And what if this comfort you cling to is not love, not peace, not freedom, but a beautifully packaged coffin? You see, the danger isn't in failure. It's in stagnation. It's in living the same year 70 times and calling it a life. It's in looking back one day and realizing you were never really alive, just anesthetized. Maybe that's the real threat. Not war, not heartbreak, not failure, but the silent, creeping numbness of a life untouched by fire. Because fire purifies. Fire transforms. Fire hurts, but it also forges. Now consider this: every person you admire, every hero you revere, every story that moved you to tears, none of them found greatness by staying comfortable. They walked through hell. They faced rejection, ridicule, exhaustion. They left comfort behind, not because they hated it, but because they loved something else more: purpose, truth, growth. So the question becomes painfully simple: what are you willing to suffer for? Because until you're willing to hurt, you'll never truly heal. Until you're willing to break, you'll never know your true shape. And until you're willing to let go of comfort, you will never touch the edge of your potential. What if the very thing you cling to is the reason you feel so lost? What if your anxiety isn't a disorder, but a signal that your soul is suffocating in a life too small? What if everything you've called peace is just avoidance wrapped in soft sheets and soothing apps? And here's the most brutal truth of all: comfort doesn't love you back. It doesn't care if you rot. It will keep you quiet, compliant, numb, and still, forever still. But growth is messy, violent, glorious. It rips you apart and stitches you into someone new. And that's where we're going. Into the shadows beneath your habits. Into the root of why we sabotage ourselves with soft illusions. Into the silent agreement you've made with mediocrity. Because once you see the trap, you can never unsee it. And once you feel the ache of unrealized potential, you can't just go back to sleep. So now that you've opened your eyes, let's descend. Let's pull back the curtain on why we run from discomfort. Why we build our lives around sedation. And how the human psyche, your psyche, was slowly conditioned to crave safety more than transformation. ready to find out what's been hiding underneath the surface all along. You weren't born afraid of pain. Look at a child, barefoot, bruised, fearless. They run, fall, cry, and laugh again, all within minutes. They climb trees too tall, ask questions too bold, and dream too wildly. There is no shame in their hunger for experience, no hesitation in their pursuit of the unknown. Discomfort is not their enemy. It is a companion in their journey to understand the world. But something changes. Not all at once, but slowly, imperceptibly. You begin to hear the words. Be careful. That's dangerous. You'll get hurt. Don't do that. Stop crying. Calm down. They call it protection. They call it love. But underneath, a more sinister force begins its quiet work, the taming of the human soul. And this is where it begins. The great unlearning. The erosion of courage, the demonization of discomfort, the slow indoctrination into the cult of comfort as virtue. Psychologically, this isn't a flaw, it's survival. The brain, particularly the amygdala, is wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain. Evolution favored the cautious. Those who sensed danger and retreated survived to pass on their genes. But the world has changed. Lions no longer stalk our villages. Most of us will not die from risk, but from regret. Still, the ancient wiring persists. And it does something dangerous in a modern context. It confuses discomfort with danger. It confuses emotional resistance with moral truth. It confuses safe with good. And so, when you feel that inner resistance, that tremble before public speaking, that panic before making a leap, that sting of criticism, you think, this must mean stop. But what if it means go? Carl Jung wrote, there is no coming to consciousness without pain. He believed that growth required confrontation with the shadow, the dark, hidden, uncomfortable truths within ourselves. But we've built entire lives around avoiding that confrontation. We hide in routines, in small talk, in screens, in work, in distraction, because facing the shadow is ugly, but not facing it, that's fatal to the soul. And what of Nietzsche, the eternal provocateur? He famously declared, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But that isn't just a quote to print on gym walls, it's a psychological blueprint. He argued that suffering, when embraced, becomes transformative. That the will to power is not domination of others, but mastery of the self, through trial, not comfort. But here's the real twist. Modern society, in its obsession with progress, has made comfort a religion. We worship it. We build technology to eliminate friction. We medicate emotions that hurt. We sanitize our days, streamline our experiences, and filter out the rawness of reality. And in doing so, we have lost something essential. Aldous Huxley warned us in Brave New World of a society so obsessed with pleasure, so drowned in ease, that it forgets how to be human. In that world, people no longer felt anything real. Everything difficult had been eliminated. And with it, so was freedom. Sound familiar? The more we engineer life to protect ourselves from discomfort, the more we disconnect from the very forces that shape us. And the irony? We don't become happier, we become anxious, numb, directionless. Because without resistance, there is no strength. Without hardship, there is no resilience. Without tension, there is no creation. Even the philosopher Viktor Frankl, writing from the horror of a concentration camp, argued that man's deepest need is not comfort, but meaning. And meaning, he said, often arises not in ease, but in suffering. When everything is stripped away, it is the struggle for purpose that gives life its depth. So why do we keep running? Because comfort is seductive. It tells you that you're okay exactly where you are. It wraps around you like a weighted blanket and whispers, don't move. But growth? Growth whispers something far less comforting. Get up. Go deeper. Let it hurt. And that terrifies us. Jean-Paul Sartre once said, man is condemned to be free. That freedom, true existential freedom, comes with responsibility, with choices, with pain. And we would rather outsource our freedom than face the weight of it. Better to stay small than to face the vastness of possibility. So we pretend. We pretend we're happy when we're just comfortable. We pretend we're fulfilled when we're just busy. We pretend we're peaceful when we're really just numb. This is not just personal. It is cultural. A global epidemic of comfort. We've turned away from pain so completely that we've begun to pathologize it. Everything uncomfortable is labeled a disorder. Everything challenging is seen as toxic. And every hardship is a crisis. But what if the true crisis is the lack of hardship? What if we've created a world so safe, so padded, that it no longer makes us real? This is the hidden enemy, not failure, not loss, not pain, but the illusion that comfort is the goal of life. And once that illusion takes root, every decision starts bending toward ease, not truth. You don't speak your mind, because it's uncomfortable. You don't chase your dream, because it's risky. You don't confront your trauma, because it's painful. You build a life not to express yourself, but to protect yourself. And in doing so, you become a shadow, a fragment, a ghost in your own story. This is not an accident. It's a system, a psychological mechanism, a cultural machine, and unless you consciously rebel against it, you will be absorbed. So now the question deepens. If comfort is not safety, but sedation, if pain is not punishment, but a path, then what happens to the soul that never burns? We're about to find out, because in the next descent, we uncover what happens when a life is lived too carefully, when you avoid the very forces meant to shape you, when you trade meaning for ease, and lose both. What are the real consequences of choosing comfort over growth? Brace yourself, we're about to step into the fire. You wake up one morning and realize nothing is wrong, but something is missing. There's no crisis, no tragedy, just a hollow kind of silence beneath your routines. You go through the motions, eat, scroll, work, smile, but somewhere, deep down, there's a scream you've trained yourself not to hear. That is the voice of unrealized potential. And it doesn't scream in words, it rots in your bones. This is the price of comfort. Not blood, not scars, but something far more tragic, the slow, silent erosion of your aliveness. See, when you avoid discomfort, you're not just avoiding pain, you're avoiding yourself. And the brain, the incredible, plastic, adaptive brain, starts to adjust. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is shaped by what we repeatedly do. And when you choose ease over challenge, numbness over presence, distraction over effort, your brain begins to prefer sedation. The circuits for resilience, courage, and long-term focus weaken. The circuits for instant gratification, fear avoidance, and dopamine chasing strengthen. In other words, your biology starts conspiring against your greatness. Your mind learns, challenge is dangerous. Restlessness means something's wrong. Pain must be escaped immediately. And so begins the loop. You avoid discomfort, you grow weaker, discomfort becomes scarier, you avoid more, you decay. And what makes it worse? Our culture rewards it. We've engineered a world where discomfort is nearly optional. Hungry, delivery, lonely, scroll, bored, swipe, anxious, numb, sad, distract. We've built 1,000 ways to escape the moment, and we use them all. But here's the truth buried under this mountain of noise. The very thing you are running from is the door to who you are meant to be. Every time you avoid the hard thing, you teach yourself that you are incapable. Every time you run from pain, you tell your soul that it must stay small to survive. Every time you choose comfort, you place a brick on the wall between you and your deepest self. And over time, the wall becomes a fortress. You become the prisoner and the guard. You forget what freedom felt like. You stop questioning the walls. You stop remembering the fire. This is what comfort does. Not in a single day, but over years, decades. It doesn't kill you with a sword, it suffocates you with softness. And that's why it's so dangerous. Because no one warns you. No one tells you that the life you're building might be a padded cell. That the dream you shelved for later is decomposing. That the routines you follow religiously are slowly amputating your wildness. Cognitive biases deepen the trap. The status quo bias whispers, if it's not broken, don't change it. The loss aversion bias tells you the pain of changing is worse than the pain of staying. The sunk cost fallacy says, you've come this far, why throw it away now? But ask yourself this, what are you losing by staying the same? Think of the dreams you once had, before the world convinced you to be realistic. Think of the risks you once considered, before fear taught you to call it wisdom. Think of the self you might have become, if you just let yourself burn. And now the consequences aren't theoretical, they're tangible. You stay in jobs that dull you. You stay in relationships that shrink you. You repeat habits that break you. You call it stability, but it's paralysis. You call it peace, but it's sedation. You begin to question why you're anxious all the time, why your soul feels tight and your chest feels heavy even when everything is fine. But your anxiety is not a malfunction. It's a signal, a cry from the buried self. You are not supposed to be okay with a life that doesn't challenge you. You are not supposed to adapt to mediocrity. When you silence that signal, you silence your transformation. And the world pays the price too. Because when a generation trades its edge for ease, the future goes dull. Innovation slows, art withers, truth decays, leaders shrink, and a society built on survival becomes one addicted to sedation. You want to know why people feel so lost? Because we've raised them to avoid the very thing that makes them real, the fire. We told them suffering is a pathology. We told them stress is a flaw. We told them discomfort is unsafe. And so we created humans who cannot hold tension, who crumble at the first sign of pain, who never develop the spiritual musculature to carry the weight of their own lives. But what if you could change that? What if you could walk straight into the fire, and emerge forged? Not everyone will. Some will continue numbing, some will keep scrolling, some will live and die in rooms without windows, wrapped in soft lies. But you're still here, reading this, feeling the pull. So let's name the truth. Every time you chose comfort over challenge, a version of you died. But every time you chose challenge over comfort, a version of you was born. You didn't get stronger by staying safe. You got stronger when you leapt without knowing the landing. When you stayed up through the night with doubt clawing at your chest. When you told the truth even though your voice trembled. When you let life cut you, and then you bled wisdom. That's the alchemy of pain. That's the gift comfort can never give you. But you can't claim that gift without paying the price. So now the fire is in front of you. And the next step, the terrifying, glorious next step, is to step into it. Because in the fire, you do not burn, you become. And in the next chapter, we discover how. We rebel, we unlearn, we choose the hard thing, we break the cycle. Are you ready to remember the version of yourself that comfort made you forget? Let's say you've had enough. You're done with numbness, done with the sleepwalk, done pretending that routine is the same as meaning. Good, because the real rebellion begins here. But don't expect it to feel like a revolution at first. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. No one claps when you stop running. No flags wave when you turn and face the truth. The rebellion begins in secret, deep inside, with a single moment of honesty. It begins the moment you say, I want more, even if it hurts. Because it will. It has to. You are, after all, going to war with a lifetime of conditioning. You're not just breaking habits, you're breaking spells. Spells cast by culture, comfort, and fear. And like any true revolution, it begins with a sacrifice. You must give up the illusion that life is meant to be easy. You must bury the fantasy that fulfillment lies in comfort. And in its place, you build something ancient, fierce, and deeply human, voluntary discomfort. It sounds absurd, doesn't it? Who chooses pain? But the Stoics did. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, practiced waking at dawn, fasting, enduring cold. Not because he had to, but because he knew that training the soul to endure willingly was the gateway to freedom. Nietzsche wrote of amor fati, a love of fate, not just enduring hardship, but embracing it. welcoming the grind, the ache, the resistance, because they forge meaning. You see, the difference between suffering that breaks you and suffering that builds you is choice. When you choose the hard thing, you are no longer a victim. You are the architect. So what does this rebellion look like? It's not glamorous. It's not Instagrammable. It looks like setting the alarm when your whole body screams no. It looks like turning down the shortcut, the excuse, the easier path. It looks like finally having that conversation, the one you've avoided for years. It looks like hitting publish, picking up the brush, standing on the stage. It looks like telling the truth, even when it costs you everything familiar. And what you'll notice is this: each act of resistance against comfort rewires your identity. Suddenly, you're no longer someone who needs ease to function. You become someone who grows from pressure, who hungers for the climb, who chooses the fire, not to be destroyed, but reforged. Let's be clear, this is not about masochism. This is not about suffering for its own sake. This is about transformative tension, the kind that stretches you, calls you upward, reveals parts of yourself you didn't know existed. It's the tension of the sculptor pressing into stone, of the seed pushing through earth, of the soul cracking its cocoon. Without pressure, there is no form. Without resistance, there is no flight. And once you realize this, you begin to seek the very things you used to run from. Failure becomes feedback. Rejection becomes redirection. Fear becomes fuel. Now the voices in your head start to change. Where they once said, "Stay safe," they now whisper, "Stay sharp." Where they once warned, "Don't fall," they now urge, "Fly higher." Because every day, with each small act of rebellion, you're proving something sacred to yourself, that you were not made for sedation. You were made to wake the hell up. History is filled with people who chose this path. Radicals who rejected comfort and embraced fire. Think of Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in a prison cell and emerged stronger than before. Of Frida Kahlo, painting from her bed, spine shattered, spirit unbroken. Of Malcolm X, who transformed himself through books, steel, and solitude. These weren't heroes because life was easy. They became legends because they walked willingly through hell, and came back carrying light. And you? You don't have to wait for a crisis to awaken. You don't need a prison to reclaim your mind. All you need is this: a refusal to stay asleep. A conscious, daily rebellion against the forces that want you small, safe, and silent. You do this in your choices, in your rituals, in your willingness to be uncomfortable on purpose. Train your body to rise when it wants to rest. Train your voice to speak when it wants to shrink. Train your spirit to expand when the world says, "Be quiet." And sooner than you think, you will begin to change. Not gradually, but quantumly. Because once you stop waiting for permission, life stops waiting for you. You'll begin to see how everything shifts. Your relationships become real. Your work becomes a calling. Your fear becomes a compass. Your days stop being something to survive, and start becoming something to sculpt. Because now, discomfort doesn't scare you. Now, you scare it. Now, you're not just existing, you're becoming. And with that becoming comes a new kind of power, one that comfort will never understand. The power to look at your life, your pain, your past, and say, "This did not break me, it built me." You are no longer the passenger. You are the force. And in this rebellion, there is no finish line. There is only the ongoing dance with difficulty, the lifelong pursuit of becoming more than you were yesterday. That is the cost. That is the gift. That is the way. So the question is no longer, can I do this? The question is, what am I leaving behind every day I don't? Because every moment you delay the fire, the soul waits. But now the waiting ends. In the final chapter, we go deeper still, into the ultimate revelation. The insight that shatters illusion. The truth that rearranges everything. The final, painful, liberating answer to the question we began with: why is comfort the enemy of growth? And more importantly, what happens when you finally stop running, and meet your own power face to face? There comes a moment, after the struggle, after the rebellion, when silence falls. Not the silence of numbness, not the dead silence of the comfort you escaped, but a deeper, almost sacred silence. It happens when you stop running, not because you're tired, but because you've turned around. And for the first time, you see clearly what was chasing you all along. It wasn't fear, it wasn't failure, it wasn't even pain. It was you, the you that wanted to grow, the you that refused to die in a cage, the you that comfort tried to sedate, but couldn't quite extinguish. And now, in this quiet, raw space, you meet that version of yourself, not in theory, not in metaphor, but viscerally, unmistakably, in the marrow of your being. You realize the truth. Growth was never about becoming something else. It was about remembering what you are. Let that land. Because this is the great inversion, the final paradox that changes everything. You didn't need to be more. You needed to feel more. You didn't need to be better. You needed to shed the lies that said you weren't already enough. Comfort was not the absence of struggle. It was the absence of self. It numbed you not because life was too painful, but because you were too powerful. Yes, that's the secret. Comfort is not afraid of your weakness. It's terrified of your awakening. Because an awakened human is a dangerous thing. A person who chooses discomfort becomes ungovernable, not by politics, but by fear. They no longer seek permission. They no longer wait to be chosen. They no longer kneel before comfort's altar, begging for crumbs of meaning. They rise, they create, they lead, not because it's easy, but because it's true. And this is what comfort tried to steal from you, your truth, your fire, your presence. Comfort told you, stay small and you'll be safe. But it never told you what you'd lose. You lost the sound of your own voice. You lost the ache that points to purpose. You lost the wild, hungry, unscripted parts of your soul that don't fit neatly into boxes or schedules. And for what? A numbed-out version of life that looks good in photos but feels hollow in silence. You know better now. Growth was never supposed to feel like perfection. It was supposed to feel like birth, bloody, chaotic, breathtaking. Think of a caterpillar in the chrysalis. It doesn't gently rearrange itself. It dissolves. It breaks down into molecular mush before reforming into a creature of wings. That's transformation. And you were always meant to dissolve too. To shed the false identities. To release the borrowed beliefs. To abandon the myth that safety is the goal. Because here is the final truth, the one comfort never wanted you to discover. You are not here to survive. You are here to ignite. You are here to become fully awake, fully human, fully alive. That doesn't mean you will never feel fear. It means fear no longer decides who you get to be. It doesn't mean the road will be smooth. It means you stop needing the road to be smooth before you take the next step. It doesn't mean you'll always know the answer. It means you become the kind of person who moves anyway. Because now, pain is no longer your enemy. Discomfort is no longer the warning sign. They are the compass, the portal, the proof that you are touching the edge of expansion. You don't run from that anymore. You run toward it. And what you find there is not destruction, but homecoming. You remember that the most meaningful moments of your life were never the easiest. They were the ones that tested you, stretched you, cracked you open. Moments where you stood trembling and said, I will do this anyway. Moments where you faced heartbreak and still chose to love. Moments where you stood at the edge of chaos and called it opportunity. This is what it means to be alive. Not to feel good all the time, but to feel everything, deeply, courageously, without flinching. So now, take this truth with you. Every time you choose the fire, you get closer to who you are. Every time you lean into resistance, you meet a stronger version of yourself. Every time you say yes to discomfort, you reclaim a piece of your soul that was hidden behind the lies of ease. You are not broken. You are becoming. And growth is not the enemy of safety. It is the birthright of the brave. So when life gets hard, good. When you feel doubt, good. When you tremble, question, ache, fall, good. Because that means you are in it. You are living. You are refusing the great sleep that swallows so many whole. You are walking awake. And you are no longer asking, how can I stay comfortable? You are asking, What am I willing to become in order to be free? Let that be your North Star. Let that question break you open, because in the end, comfort may feel safe. But growth, true growth, feels like freedom, and once you taste that kind of freedom, you'll never settle for sedation again. You'll burn, you'll rise, you'll remember who you are, not because someone told you to, but because one day, you looked in the mirror and finally said, I choose the fire.